Welcome to the Kafui Day Show. Today's episode will feature a human rights lawyer, a public interest lawyer, a politician, an author, an entrepreneur, a Christian leader, and a preacher. One person with so many roles, and he has been in the forefront of the news last week because the death penalty is no more in Ghana and the witch camps have been abolished. Who is this person working on these big issues? You find out in a short while. Remember to subscribe and like and share and hit the notification bell so that the next time new content comes your way, you'll be the first to get it. And now to my guest, Francis Xavier Sosu, MP for Madina constituency, Greater Accra Region, Ghana. Welcome to the Kafui Day Show.
Yeah, thank you. Wow.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
So last week, we ended on a high with the abolition of the witch camps, and we started also on a high with the abolition of the death penalty in Ghana.
That's correct.
Two momentous achievements. And let's talk about, first of all, the death penalty.
Okay.
I put the question out for followers on social media. If they could ask you one question, what would it be? And quite a few said, why did you decide to go against the death penalty in Ghana?
I would say that it wasn't a personal decision per se. I think I was only following up the aspirations of many Ghanaians expressed over the years, except that there was a little gap which I sought to fill. And that gap was, I think, the will to move, to where we are now. I believe that every society and every generation would give birth to its own leaders that would come with very unique characteristics and may seek to contribute to major policy shifts or social changes. And so when you get the opportunity to be there, you must dare to dream and dare to make those dreams a reality. Kafui, many people dream during the night and others dream during the day. And I think but fewer people are able to carry those dreams to reality. And sometimes they are few because it's more difficult, it's more challenging. I mean, there are difficulties when you want to carry them through. Are you
the first person to have tried to get rid of the death penalty?
No. I think that when you look at the history of the death penalty even in Ghana, from 1957 till, till date, about 49 people have been killed, including a former head of state. And most of these killings happened during military regimes. And when you think of the fact that from 1993 till date, no president has been able to sign a death warrant to kill anyone, it tells you that there is a general desire to move away from the death penalty. Then when you look at the Constitutional Review Commission's work in 2010, and their recommendation, because they recommended that the death penalty provision be replaced with life sentence. That's in 2010. In 2011, the government of the day at the time, with a government white paper, accepted those recommendations and asked that the death penalty be removed. But except that from 2011 till date, much of what has happened is advocacy and campaign led by CSOs like Amnesty International Ghana,
Civil society organizations.
Civil society organizations,
okay.
Yeah, and they have been campaigning that, look, we need to remove the death penalty. We need to remove the death penalty. And it was quite difficult because everybody knew that if you would remove the death penalty, you probably would have to do a constitutional amendment. And Article 3 in the 1992 Constitution is an entrenched provision. So it was difficult trying to do a referendum to remove death penalty from our statute books. And along the line, during the consultation, persons like lawyer Martin Pebu, even prescribed the creative approach of going around the Constitution by means of by means of statutory amendment. And at the time, the only amendment we're proposing was amendment to the Criminal Offences Act. But once the bill got introduced in Parliament and the Speaker referred it to the drafting department led by Senator Achu, who is the Deputy Director of the Draft Department in Parliament, through their research, came up with the fact that beyond the Criminal Offences Act, there was a need to also amend the Armed Forces Act. And then that raised the bigger question that if you are going to bring a policy shift that will affect the Ghana Armed Forces, then that's a critical one, and you would need to then do further engagement. So we had to engage the Ghana Armed Forces and engage several other stakeholders to ensure that we can get the buy-in of everyone for purposes of the bill going through. The Catholic Bishops' Conference came on board. Archbishop Duncan William, His Eminence came on board. We had the Islamic, the Chief Imam's Office came on board. And we had several other CSOs that were really interested who all came on board. The Death Penalty Project of UK, they supported with research because they had commissioned a research in Ghana in 2015 on opinion polls to see what people feel about the death penalty.
What did the research say in 2015?
In fact, in 2015, the research showed that majority of Ghanaians, in fact, majority of persons who are family of victims, majority of them, over 53% of them, said they wanted the death penalty abolished.
Even those who were affected by
the family
whatever
of,
crime
family of victims
that lost somebody's life.
And there were several others who did not really care. And there were others who also did not understand which offenses the death penalty applied to. Some thought that the death penalty applied to robbery. So they thought that when people go and rob, they should rather kill them. So there was a lot of confusion in the mind of people when it comes to the use of... In fact, many did not know that even smuggling in gold and diamond could land you into a death penalty.
And now that you are there, what were the offenses that merited the death penalty in Ghana, and how were people executed back in the day?
Well, so the offenses that merited the death penalty, one of them is a constitutional offense, which is the treason, high treason. Fortunately for us, nobody in this Fourth Republic, nobody has ever been charged and successfully under that provision. And so all the 178 people on death row were all charged under the Criminal Offences Act.
But isn't that what Mr. Baka Vomawo is being charged under high treason?
Well, because without prejudice to whatever the court is trying to investigate, when you look at the Constitution and the provisions in the Constitution as to what amounts to high treason, I wonder how that could be proved in court.
Okay.
But of course, because it's before court, so nobody will say that we are in contempt of court. We will just leave it there. Because when you look at the provision, there has never been successful prosecution under those provisions. And I will read the provisions for the purpose of our viewers very, very soon.
So high treason was one of them?
Yeah, high treason was one of them. Then we have murder. Then we have attempted murder. So if you attempted and you were even not successful, whether you were or you were not successful,
you could be killed.
You could be killed. Then we have piracy. And then we have genocide. Then we had smuggling in gold and diamond.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I think that these were just colonial, ways of getting people in check, because when they came during the Gold Coast time, gold was was the highest commodity at the time. And so they wouldn't want anybody to go smuggle.
Go touch the gold.
Exactly. So it became a very serious offense. In fact, if that were anything to go by today, and there is one military leader who comes and says, I want to go kill everybody. Like everybody doing Galamsey could be killed. Yeah, because that would typically amount to smuggling in gold and diamonds and so on and so forth. So these were some of the offenses that attracted
the death penalty.
The death penalty.
And how were people being executed?
They were executed by firing squad or by hanging. You see, so when you look at a typical, you have a real description of the hanging process. Wow, it's unbelievable.
How does it
now? Okay, so when you are led to the gallows, what happens is that there is a hole, a dark hole, like a dark dungeon, beneath a platform where you are made to stand. And when you stand on that platform, you typically you would be wearing a jacket, it's a specially made jacket with which you would be tied, with your hands tied in there, your face covered, and the rope wrapped around your neck. And what happens is that once they are ready to execute, the platform is opened for you to fall, you know, into the hole. And that happens like within some split seconds. You fall in, and I mean the machine will pull you back, and you know you fall in again, and it pulls you back until you know the person dies. And that typically is torture and degrading and dehumanizing treatment. And
then the execution by firing squad consisted of what?
It's also, I mean, you are also blindfolded and you are tied around a stick or like tied around a platform where soldiers, where execution officers who typically may be using guns will point at you and shoot you.
How many people in the execution party?
Well, it's usually, it depends. I mean, it depends. If the number of people to be shot are many, then the number of people who will be doing the shooting will be many. But if it's just one person, I mean, one person who is, I mean, qualified to shoot can go kill.
Did you know whether we still have a hangman?
We do. In fact, the entire process still exists, except that since 1993, we have not been able to execute anybody. The president has not been able to sign any warrant for killing. The truth is that even for all the people who have been killed in Ghana, most of those killings occur mainly during military regimes. But during like civilian government, it's so difficult for government to sign, you know, the death warrant of people. But it is a very, very terrible experience.
I know that in the military eras, the executions were done publicly. But was there also the situation of people being executed in the prisons with the hanging and the firing squad?
Yes, I mean, usually the hanging is usually done in the prisons. Yeah, and I haven't had the real story of shooting within the prison. We haven't discovered that. But I should think that some killings took place within the prisons.
And did all the prisons in Ghana have facilities to undertake executions?
Currently, the one that I know is in Sawam prisons.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Sawam prisons.
Did you ever have the opportunity to speak to anybody on death row to get a sense of what their emotions and their
I have, and it's first of all, it's a terrible. It's a terrible place to be in the first place.
Describe it.
So when you get into a typical condemned cells, you don't have like access to adequate air. So even oxygen is limited in that space. Light is limited in that space. You are typically isolated. You typically would not have recreation or very limited recreation. It's fairly a dark room and leads to the gallows where the killings are done. And so it's a very difficult place to be. And you see, these prisons, particularly the condemned cells, were not meant to keep people forever. They were meant to keep people temporarily for killing, so they will be killed. Unfortunately, we had a practice where they are in condemned and we are not killing them, and they are just, you know, confined to that condition. And so it is a very difficult situation. In fact, for many people in condemned cells, it doesn't take long. You see that they deteriorate. I mean, their body, the kind of develop all kinds of body illness, and of course they are malnourished, and so they live under very, very poor and very deplorable conditions.
What happens to their state of mind?
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of torture because they die every day. If you're on the death row, you die every day.
Do you know how long people have stayed on death row?
Yes, people have stayed on death row for several years. Some because typically when you do 20 years before you are commuted to life. So I, even as a lawyer, I had clients who are on death row. And I speak with them. You know, just the Tuesday before the law was passed, I was even not in Parliament when the law was passed. I was in some prisons. And I was actually engaging an inmate of the condemned cells. And when we finished the engagement, I recall other condemned cell inmates who came to tell me that, we've heard about the bill that is ongoing. Assuming it gets passed, what is going to be our status? What's going to happen to us?
Good question. What is their status now that the bill has been passed?
Well, they are status because we don't pass retrospective laws in Ghana. What is going to happen is that upon signing of the law, signing the act into law, into full force, we have passionately appealed to the President of the Republic to commute their sentences to life. If that does not happen, then I could lead a class action with the support of other CSOs either at the Supreme Court or at the Human Rights High Court for an order of that commutation based on the new law.
So as it stands right now, it's been repealed by Parliament. What is the next step?
So the next step is that the President of the Republic is going to sign it.
Does he have a deadline?
He typically does not have, there's a time limit within which the President is supposed to sign. But if the President has a reason not to sign, he usually will make those reasons known to Parliament. But as far as this bill is concerned, the President has demonstrated some goodwill in terms of this course, because I recall that last December, the President at the UN signed in favor of a resolution. He actually voted in favor of a resolution to end the use of death penalty. And so having signed that at the UN level and having gotten the opportunity for a law to advance that position, I believe that it would just be appropriate that he would sign. And I'm confident that he will sign. But my hope is that beyond the signature, we would want him to show some good faith towards that direction by commuting the sentences of death of all those on death row, currently 178, if you can commute all of them to life imprisonment.
Have you had the chance to speak one-on-one with the President about this particular death penalty project that you've done?
I have. It wasn't a typical one-on-one conversation, but it was a conversation with stakeholders, but I addressed it. And I think that he was convinced by the argument that we had put forward. I was there together with the Catholic Bishops Conference, representatives of Amnesty International, and representatives and researchers from my outfit who were working together on the death penalty project. And so, in fact, it was after this engagement that the President signed at the UN level in favor of the resolution to end the use of death penalty. And so we believe that the engagement has had some positive impact on the President when it comes to advancing this aspect of our human rights, and particularly with protection of rights to life and guaranteeing that nobody is subjected to torture, degrading and dehumanizing treatment.
As a human being, what does the repeal of this death penalty in Ghana mean to you?
Honestly, it means a lot. It means a lot because life is life. And life for life will lead to an extinction of our generation. If we are going to do eye for an eye, then we are only going to create a blind society. We need a society that can reconcile itself with offending persons. Punishment generally has evolved from retributive punishment, which was more repressive, to reformative justice. And the reformative justice said, look, punishment must not only be repressive, but let's see whether people who have offended the state could have an opportunity to reconcile with the state. And over the years, it moved from reformative justice to what we now call restorative justice. Now, the restorative justice take into consideration not only the perpetrator who we want to reform, but also the victim or the family of victims, because then we are thinking about reparation, compensation, how we can deal with those victims. And you know, Kafui, if you look at the trend of evolution of all these penalties, it is only trying to build a better society. I mean, a more open society, a more responsive society, a more loving society that is able to reconcile people to itself. And if we do that, in the next 30 years, our children would not be expecting death as a form of punishment. And we'll be recreating our generation. We'll be shifting the mind of our generation. And there is evidence all over the world that suggests that societies that do not retain this type of punishment have become more civil. I mean, violent crime, murder, and all those evil that people do have reduced. And so I believe that this is a process of building a better society. It's a process of, rebranding our society, if you so desire, because generations after generations would come and go, but the next generation would come to inherit a system that does not endorse killing for killing.
I'm curious as to how the people directly affected by this repeal, those on death row, how do they feel about this development in the law? You were in Nsawam when it was announced.
Yes. Honestly, for some strange reason, I've had so many calls from Nsawam prisons.
Who is calling you?
I mean, I've had people, prison officers call, to express their joy. I've had people on death row who have had, opportunity to reach out either by messaging or call to say that I'm on death row and we are elated. Typically, Kafui is like giving life to a dying person. It's like some poor soul that is dying off suddenly receives life. And sometimes I just wonder why we all claim we are Christians, we are a godly nation, and yet sometimes it's so difficult for us to promote reconciliation, forgiveness, and it's so difficult for us to let love lead our society. So I think we are just too religious, and yet we are not godly, and that is really sad, because if your religiousness cannot translate into godliness, then you are practicing religion in vain, because godliness requires forgiveness. Godliness requires reconciling people, and that was what Jesus came to do. In fact, it's the reason why even the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that even when people are willing to atone for their sins, even if their penalty must be death, they must be forgiven. And so every religion in Ghana has higher values, higher aspirations, and the aspirations of forgiveness, mercy. But these are the very aspirations that we don't want to hear about. And so it's quite strange that on one breath, we say we are a religious nation. Majority of us are Christians. We say all those things. But when push comes to shove, people become more vengeful, rather than being reconciliatory.
Mr. Francis Xavier Sosu, the Honorable Member of Parliament for Madina, yes. I put it to you that you are totally off script. Where do you get this audacity as a first-term Member of Parliament? You're supposed to be on the back bench observing your seniors. Are there some people who are thinking, how dare this young man go do this?
Well, let me say that the Bible says in the book of Daniel 11:38 that those who know their God shall be strong and they shall do exploits. And so I believe that, look, God brought all of us into politics for different reasons. We all came to parliament with different talents, different skills, different passions, different goals. And I think that I'm only living out my passion and living out my goal, and doing what I believe that at this day, and I mean in this day and age, what God will want me to do. I believe that it's a form of service to my people, because the total number of prime members bill I've introduced are about 10. In fact, there are several others I was working on, particularly decriminalizing petty crimes, and other things that I've been working on. I don't believe that all of them would pass before Parliament, before this term ends. However, we'll keep working at it. I'd rather work at it and not have it pass than not attempt at all. So I think that, I don't know how to put it.
Was it a game changer, this private members bill?
I think that
because it hasn't always been in our parliament.
So yeah, I agree. The private members bill is a creation by the 7th Parliament, when the former Speaker, Right Honorable Michael Kafui, introduced the private members bill concept that allowed private members to sponsor bills.
Formerly, what was the case when there was no private members bill?
It was the case that it was only the government that could, only the executive actually that could initiate a bill. But that was quite problematic, because when the executive, the executive is always, backed down by several interests, right?
Including the party.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And
mainly, chiefly the party.
and
you don't agree?
And when government comes, they always come with what they call manifestos, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And they want to pursue the agenda in their manifesto, because they believe that you would be judged by those manifesto promises, right? And so it's entirely possible that some areas of national importance may not be priority areas for government. And if you are a legislator and you are in parliament, on account of this opportunity to come by private members bill, you could pick those non-priority areas for the government and then push it through the various stages of amendment. And I think that was what pretty much I sought to do, because already there was a lot of stakeholder engagement. Amnesty has been working, everybody has been working on this thing. I was part of even the process at a certain point in time before I became a member of parliament. So I felt that was an opportunity for me to introduce it through the private members. And thank God it was successful. And of course, there are some other bills that I've done with other colleagues, but the death penalty bill was something that I introduced solely. And also because at the time...
So you were the only sponsor of that bill?
Yes.
Okay.
At the time, I wasn't too sure the reaction of people towards it. Sometimes you may have an idea, but not many people share that passion at the time.
What was the reaction when you announced that you were sponsoring this?
I think that, first of all, many people, the first reaction is many people do not really care.
You don't care about the death penalty?
Many people do not really care. They don't... You see, if it doesn't affect you directly, you won't know. Unless you have worked with the area for some time and you know the danger of retaining the law, and you've done some historical analysis to understand that, look, this law, maybe a civil government may not use it. But maybe, like Myanmar in Asia, they didn't use the law for 42 years. But when there was a military takeover, 4 leaders were immediately executed. In fact, some of the trials were done at night.
And it was legal.
Yeah, it's legal because the law allows them to kill. Look at Burkina Faso. There have been 2 attempt coups, but nobody was killed because they have abolished the death penalty. So, you'll be seen as doing extrajudicial killing if you go and kill. You see, so when you have changed the law, you've changed it.
So your biggest problem was indifference, was it?
That was the biggest problem. And in fact, that I wasn't too surprised by that, because it is supported by literature, by research. You know, the research that happened in 2015 about public opinion, there were a large proportion of people, over 40%, that really do not care whether it's there or not. Really, it's not part of it. They don't really care. You know, so the indifference was there, but so eventually it was when it got to its advanced stage that people began to see that no, I mean, like it was a bigger conversation than they probably had conceived, you know. So, and I think it applies to almost every other bill, even the anti-witchcraft bill. Initially, when I started, I know we'll be having that conversation, but initially when we started, the total number of sponsors that were on the bill, I mean, it began with me, but I felt that, you know, if you want to go fast, you can run alone. But if you want to go far, you need more people, right? So the first approach is to, once the idea comes, to reach out to people who would come on board. And I reached out and we had over 9 sponsors. But to get them together to work was so difficult. It was always slowing the process down. And even when we were ready to get the bill signed for Gazette, I was not getting other people to come and sign.
In the end, how many people signed?
So in the end, I had to remove as many I can remove. And then those I could get to sign, which were 4 others plus myself, they signed, then we push it through.
Okay.
So it always begins with the desire to engage many more people. But sometimes the practicality of everyone coming on board to move as fast as you may want to move sometimes becomes, you know, a challenge, you know. And so these are, I mean, the background stories to. So the private members bill is indeed, I believe, is a game changer for the Parliament of the Republic of Ghana. It will advance many causes because when you look at some of the issues I've been advocating for through the private members bill, like mental health being part of NHIS, every condition in children, particularly cancer and tumor, must be covered under NHIS. Victims of sexual violation must be covered under NHIS. Employment of persons with disability before the Compensations Act. These are things that we are working on, which are different levels of completion. But I was glad that the death penalty bills had moved much faster, and I needed to invest a little bit more energy and time to ensure that they get to where they are now before we can now look at the other one. So I think it is a product of many people. But except that
we must congratulate you because you are the arrowhead to make this happen.
Yeah, it's correct. But you know how even we are on this show, all the people who sometimes make the great, you know, who make it happen, many probably may never hear of them because they are behind the scenes.
I get you.
They are looking at the lights. They are looking at the sounds. So there are many people who have advised from behind. Many people who have, you know, guided the process. It will always take an individual to have an idea and a vision, but it will always take the collective to make it happen. So you can imagine me having this beautiful idea, and then the speaker say, "I'm not admitting it."
It's not going to. It's dead on arrival.
Now, when speaker admits, speaker refers it to the drafting department. So imagine the drafting department decides not to draft this bill. Nothing will happen.
Right.
And when the drafting department finished, we have to do stakeholders meeting. And one person whose name has been missing is Justice Sir Dennis Ejay of the Court of Appeal, who was so phenomenal when it comes to the advice, the guiding of the processes, even the drafts, and he was through with us from the beginning to the end. I mean, Sir Dennis Ejay was super, and he is a judge of the African Court of Justice. And he was super good. He always represented the judiciary and made his inputs and really guided the process throughout.
So it's a team game.
Yeah, it's always a team
game.
It's always a team.
I'm just wondering who has recognized the import of this particular decision. What kind of feedback have you gotten first from home and abroad?
I think that this is a global course because Ghana just joined some over 170 countries across the globe that have abolished a penalty for, well, people say for ordinary crimes, even though our reality is that these crimes are the only crimes that have sent people on death row. So in reality, we are quite there. Yeah, even though we still have some little work to do with the constitution, and so I mean, I saw many stories across board, either from BBC to Al Jazeera to media. Almost all media houses in UK were discussing this. It was on Washington Post, The Guardian. Stations from Canada, stations from Germany. Several people have actually reached out. France 24 just called and said they were interested in doing some story on Ghana's move to abolish the death penalty. And so it's a global cause, and I think that Ghana deserves celebration and Ghana deserves commendation.
And rightly so. But what about our institutions? The Ghana Bar Association, the judges, legal council?
I think that, I think International Bar Association, the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, several other international institutions have done something, but
Ghana is not interested.
Kafui, let's not belittle it. You see, and I believe in the Bible. The Bible says that a prophet is not honored by his own people, and I've always believed that. And so it's not too much about even what the local people may say.
But how does that make you feel, Francis Xavier?
Well, I think that it still kind of makes me feel empowered to keep fighting for what I believe must be good, because I believe that leadership is about taking people where they ought to be, even if they don't want to be there. And so many people will say that many leaders are many generations ahead of their peers. When people talk about that, it's a reality, because what you believe must be the change, the factor of change, the acceleration of change. Not many people will believe that. But my philosophy has actually always been that people will not always believe what you believe. It's okay if they don't believe you. But if you keep believing what you believe, and you encourage others to believe what you believe, someday they will believe what you believe.
Well put. And so from death penalty issues to witch camps.
Yes.
Your interests are broad. Why witch camps? What took you there?
Well, I think witch camps...
Do you know any alleged witches?
Okay, so I have witnessed accusation of witchcraft before. And when I saw what happened...
What happened?
When I was growing up, it was a woman that was alleged to be a witch. And the one making the allegation actually took... it wasn't a knife, it was a machete, and was chasing the woman around the house, wanting to butcher the woman and kill her, because he claimed that the woman was a witch.
How old were you?
And I was very little, probably maybe very little, because we were very young. I might be maybe 6, 7 those days, I think. And was going around.
Did you understand what was going on?
Well, all we knew is that they said the woman was a witch and they were going to kill her or going to deal with her. That was all they said. And so it was something that always lived with me until I grew to now understand this, when I started reading the stories about people being lynched on account of witchcraft accusation. And so it was an area I was so much interested in. And so when I heard that there was a bill in the 7th Parliament to abolish or to criminalize witchcraft accusation, I was so interested.
This is the Parliament before your Parliament?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so I was following, but I realized that it was not passed before that Parliament was dissolved.
Educate people who don't know. So what happens if a bill is going through the processes and then 6th January of the year after the election is upon you? What happens?
Well, so the bill dies.
Reset to zero.
Yeah. It resets to zero. But the Parliament is that Parliament has been dissolved. So it dissolves with everything.
Wow.
So it must be reintroduced. Unfortunately, some of those who were part of those sponsoring it at the time, could not make it to Parliament again.
Okay.
So when I got to Parliament, I reached out straight to the drafting department that I recall that the 7th Parliament was doing something on this witchcraft accusation.
So do they keep the documents there?
Oh yeah,
waiting for a revival.
It will be in the archives and all that.
Okay.
So I was interested in knowing what it was. So the draft department then told me that the institution that brought the petition was Sane Institute, and that they were going to put me in contact with Sane Institute to see how we could revive, because there were some issues with the draft at the time. And they were not finding solutions to it, and so they were going forth and back before the Parliament got dissolved.
Was that one introduced with the private members bill?
Yes, it was introduced as a private members bill.
Okay, all right. Do you know who introduced it?
I think the former leader on our side and the former leader on the former minority and former majority
former leader would be Honorable
Haruna Idrisu and the Honorable
Chairman
Bosu.
Okay.
And I think Honorable Ayamga, who is part of the sponsors.
Okay.
And some others who were in the gender committee at the time.
Okay.
But who could not make it to Parliament again.
Okay. So you got the documents?
Yeah, so I got those initial documentation. So I began my own research into what could be the limitations and all that. So when I got what the challenges were, I decided to broaden the stakeholder engagement.
Okay, before you continue,
yeah,
for somebody who is wondering, man, 21st century, witch camps in Ghana, what's all this? Who are in these witch camps? How many witch camps are there? Where are they?
Well, there used to be about 7. 2 of them are gone now. Those that are currently there, which I believe this bill will be dealing with, one is in Patinga, one is in Kuku, one is in Gani, one is in Gambaga, and I think one other that I can't remember immediately, but they are all in the northern part of Ghana.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many women are in? Is it no wizards?
Well, I think few. I think 9 wizards and about 500 and I think 530. About 530. I mean, witches.
Alleged witches.
Alleged witches.
What's the age range?
Oh, most of them are very, very, very old. Elderly women. Though some will be. I will share some of the pictures and videos with you of people who we saw when we went to the witch camps with all the stakeholders and some of the sponsors who joined in that process.
How do they get there? Who brings them there?
So the history of the witches camps is that it used to be a safe haven for persons who were labeled as witches. Because when you are labeled as a witch, it's like a death penalty to you.
You don't have a right of appeal?
In that community. No, I mean, who are even when you are, first of all, when you are alleged to be a witch, there is always a desire by the one making the allegation for you to swear to prove that you are not a witch. So it is the reverse. So when you are alleged as a witch, it's not that you go to the palace, or you go
the
to
court or something.
the court, or you go to a witch doctor to go and prove your. I mean, it's not the case that
your non-witchhood.
It's not the case that the one making the allegation is coming before the witch doctor to prove that allegation.
So what? I can get up and say, "Listen, Francis Xavier, you are a wizard."
It's speaking like the book I wrote titled "Guilty Until Proven Innocent."
Yes.
In the typical witch accusation, once you are accused, you are already guilty.
So you accuse me and boom.
That is it. So just an accusation can make you lose your home, lose your family, lose wife and children, lose your properties, and in some cases, you could be lynched.
But that's terrible.
And that is where the problem is. You see, so that is why it's such a problem, because once you are accused, you must be the one to either take an oath or be subjected to some exorcism process to prove your innocence. And so so we have a group of people who call themselves witch doctors or witch catchers or witch finders. And they ostensibly are the people who have the magical powers.
The technology.
Yes, yes, the spiritual technology to determine whether you are a witch or not. And so an accusation goes forth. The person is immediately rushed upon and either beaten or, either subjected to all kinds of treatment. The person needs to run away. If you don't run and maybe you are apprehended, if you are lucky and you are not killed, you are sent to the witch doctor or the witch finder. He will then administer some concoctions to ascertain whether you are actually a witch or not. And most often they mix all kinds of things that even kill the people. Poisonous substances. When they die in the process, they say, because they are witches. That's why they died. And so it was a very terrible practice. So people who are accused, sometimes for fear of their life, immediately would run away.
Oh, so they take themselves
Some
to the
are
camp.
banished for this community. So when they run away, they run to these camps that have been established, that are known as the witch camps, for safety.
Describe what goes on in those camps.
So the camps are supposed to just be a holding place for people who have been accused. But it developed into a religious, I would say a religious enterprise, where when now you run and come to the camp, there are admission customs.
Oh.
So first of all, when you come there, they say you are alleged witch, they wanted to kill you. Now the witch finder or the doctor will now have to administer some, either you confess that you are a witch, then they can keep you and
some kind of protocols.
Be treating you, or then you don't confess and they do all kinds of things to ascertain whether you are or you are not. Then when they finish that, you then live in the camp at the mercy of the witch doctor or the camp leader or whoever is in charge of that camp.
Doing what on a daily basis?
On a daily basis, you just live there. You do nothing. So you farm for them. So it's a typical slavery situation.
Do family members come to visit?
Well, we had some who their grandchildren come with them to be with them. There are some who do not have family members visit at all. And there are some who the accusations were by family members. So the family don't want to have anything to do with it because they are saying that the family is not moving forward because of you. So and it's so crazy because even when the people who are there are desirous of leaving the camp by themselves, there is also what they call the discharge ritual. And you won't believe it.
What happens? What goes on?
First of all, these people who are so poor and do not have anything are required to cough out 700 Ghana cedis. These very poor women. And they are required to bring a sheep. And then a white fowl is killed.
White.
With the blood poured out. They squeeze the blood out, mix the blood with corn flour and with water and some concoctions. And the women are meant to oh Lord have mercy.
To drink this.
To drink this.
As a purifying something?
As part of
the ritual, exit
ritual.
Rituals.
Before they even get a chance to move out of that place. So it's crazy. It's just crazy. It's bad. And so this law has come to outlaw all these practices.
So no more witch camps in Ghana?
First of all, you cannot even say you are a witch doctor or you are practicing as a witch finder. Or you have the capacity to go and determine anybody who is a witch. You don't have, that doesn't exist anymore. You cannot accuse positively of anybody of witchcraft. If witchcraft is a spiritual thing, everybody should go deal with it spiritually. Yes. When Jesus saw a man with, legions of demons, he didn't go accusing the person. He casted them out. So you are a pastor. You are a prophet. You are the mouthpiece of God, and you have the pulpit, you have radio, you have TV, you have ability to influence a huge congregation. If you see a witchcraft spirit in someone, your duty is to cast it out. It's not to accuse the person as being a witch. Such accusation has led to breakdown of families. People have been accused and their wives or their husbands leave them. People have been accused and there is breakdown in the family unit. Grandchildren are not living at peace with their grandparents. Children are not living at peace with their own parents. How can your own mother want to destroy you? You know, so if it is a spiritual thing, we are looking forward to everyone dealing with this spiritually, so that you don't have the space to accuse positively anybody of being a witch under this law. So, otherwise, you go to prison for 5 years.
Oh, so the punishment is 5 years?
Yes.
So does this law, now that this law has been repealed, does it also require the president to sign it, like the death penalty one?
Yes. So this one is not a repeal. This one is it's a new law. It's an amendment of the Criminal Offences Act, provision that deal with trial by ordeal.
Okay.
Then to prescribe all these things. And yes, this law will require the presidential assent to come into force. And it has placed some other obligations on the Minister for Gender, Children, and Social Protection.
Like what?
To ensure that once the law comes into force, it will take steps to, disband all the camps. And that will require a number of things, because one, there's a need for major sensitization. We need to go back to the communities to let them know the effect of the law. We must meet the chiefs, the people, the social welfare in all at the district level. We have to go to the community and do that community engagement to let them know the effect of that law. And also, after the sensitization, the Ministry of Gender, Children, and Social Protection will have to work with community leaders, the Social Welfare Department, as well as CSOs, so we can properly reintegrate all these over 539 persons who are unfortunately being kept in various camps on account of witchcraft accusation.
Do they have wind of this particular development in the law?
They have. In fact, someone called me who works with the witch camps and was overjoyed that this law has come to pass. When we did the community engagement and we went to all the camps, he was one of those during our engagement that was speaking against the bill.
He wanted the camps to remain.
Yeah.
Is he a witch finder?
So we were like, well, it was like an industry. So there were definitely people who want,
of course,
to continue the industry, because by this law, you virtually have cut the source.
Yeah.
You know, where people, because it is the accusation that leads to the abuses.
Yes.
So once you have cut off the accusation, the abuses will reduce, and with time, the camps will dry off. And so, but when it passed, he called me personally and said, I am so grateful and thankful that this law has finally come.
So as we speak today, as we're recording this interview, there are still women in those camps. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
There are.
What's the timeline for them to be, for the camps to be decommissioned?
It depends. I think that, it depends, because it's usually a process. I am hoping that once the president signs the law into, assents to the law, the Ministry of Gender, Children, and Social Protection will roll out the program outline for that process. And I am willing to volunteer on any committee or any task force or any group of people who would have to assist the process to ensure that these are vulnerable people are protected. Because, like I said in Parliament the last time, you know, development of every society is also measured by how we treat the most vulnerable persons, you know, in our communities. And so we have no choice. It's a burden, it's a call to duty, and everyone will have to get involved for us to make, the society more just and equitable for persons who are unfortunately victims of vulnerability or who are victims of such accusations.
I must commend you for these two pieces of legislation that are coming into effect. I mean, the repeal of the death penalty and then this amendment to the law that prescribes trial by ordeal. What other private member bills are you working on?
Well, there's quite a number of others which we are working on. For example, with Honorable Dafiamekpo, we've been working on the bill to reform the law school.
What do you want the outcome to be?
I think we just wanted the law school opening up so that every faculty that runs law program across the country, will have the capacity to run the professional law program, and there will be a unified bar exams.
So Makola will go to other places. So nobody
It
goes
can
to
become
Makola
it can become another faculty,
okay,
where people could be trained.
Right.
So basically breaking the monopoly in the way the legal education is done now, and also asking that we reform the membership of the General Legal Council, and so to make it more open and more accountable compared to what it is today. And so it's also ongoing.
So that's one.
And then we've been working together, myself with Honorable Okujeto Ablakwa and Honorable Gisao, working on the what we call the climate change bill, which is seeking to place an obligation on the state for all violations. So all the this pollution and all that. So instead of me chasing after the one polluting the place, I will chase after government because they are failing to, because assemblies have the duty to regulate that space. And the assemblies are direct representation of the executive. And so if they fail to do that, then the citizen can actually take the government on, for compensation. If the people are littering, and we have problem of garbage, and we have major problems that affect, the climate, we can place obligation on the government through the climate action bill that we're working on. There are some three that I call the health bills.
Okay.
Those health bills, one of them is conditions in children. This cancer and tumor condition in children. If you travel across Accra, you see people carrying kids with, various conditions. It's so heartbreaking to see children being held on the sun, and people begging for money to treat those children. Some are just vulnerabilities that they cannot do anything about, and some are also exploitation of these children because some just use them for fundraising, and it doesn't really go to these children. But we can stop this by this bill when, if passed, we are adding every condition, particularly tumor and cancer conditions in children, add it to the NHIS.
Okay.
And once you add it to the NHIS, we criminalize the process of holding children around town and begging money.
Fundraise.
And when that happens, technically across the country, we will not be seeing people holding children on the streets, trying to fundraise to take care of them. And then there is one other that has to do with the victims of sexual violations. Now, those who are either defiled or raped have to pay between 300 and 1,500 Ghana cedis before doctors sign their medical forms.
That's adding insult to injury.
Exactly. And then the doctors are claiming that because they will have to come to court if they call them to come and support prosecution. I'm like, but it's the state that is with the prosecution. Why punish the victim?
Exactly.
And so through the private members bill, we're proposing that it will be added to the National Health Insurance Scheme so that when a child or anyone either raped or defiled has a valid NHIS, a medical doctor will have no choice than to sign those forms. And maybe if the state will so that when the state can have an arrangement to compensate them if they have to come to court to do what they need to do anyway, which is, a legal thing they need to do. And it's just a way of protecting these victims. And there was also a proposal to add mental health conditions to the NHIS because here in Madina, I have the Pantan Hospital. I have visited and frequented the place a number of times, and one of the challenges I've seen is people, it's a cash and carry system. So if you don't have money, you cannot, have mental health services.
If you don't have cash, you can't carry your drugs.
You can't carry, that's it. So we want to add and proposing that we add it to the NHIS so that when you have a valid NHIS card, you also can have treatment under the mental health amendments that we are proposing. And so
if your bills are passed, it's going to put a lot of stress on the National Health Insurance levy.
Well, when you look at the NHIS, we just have to improve the system, and we can get a lot of money. We've done the analysis. Unfortunately, I don't have all the facts and figures here, but we've done, a massive analysis to look at the annual collections, and we've looked at the NHIS levy, which is also a tax component. When you put the amount of money that we recover out of NHIS annually, then at least no child and no person who is a vulnerable person, because mental health conditions are vulnerabilities. Children who are defiled are vulnerabilities, and children with cancer and tumor are vulnerabilities. And so there must be a conscious effort by the state to create a child welfare state.
What if the executive says, you know what, yeah, fine, we'll do this, we'll support this, but then we'll have to increase the NHIL, the National Health Insurance levy?
Why not?
Is that a trade-off that you
why
would
not
want to see?
Why not? If the executive believes that we can do that and that would help, why not? Because look, it's a problem. We need to solve the problem. So how do we solve it? If it means that, we need to increase NHIS levy, why not? Because it's something, I'm even looking forward to these bills before they get to a level where you cannot add on sponsors. And I'm speaking to my colleagues and reaching out to them one-on-one and all that. And even some people, both in the minority and majority side, have expressed interest in some of the bills. And so we can have a more cross-party approach to passing some of them. And even if government want to absorb some of them completely to pass, we'll be willing to lend the support. But what is important is that these are major policy directions that I believe are pro-poor, pro-vulnerable people. It supports, the needy and the have-nots and the underserved, and whatever we can do to push that, we need to, because for me, I believe I am here for this reason, and that is why I am more passionate about them, and I'm just doing everything I could to make sure that it works for all of us.